What's up, man? It is the recap for the first ever, the inaugural, the Kings Classic IDP draft that Jorge, you were supposed to take it. I'm hoping when you pass that baton on to me that I did not fumble the baton. That's not for me to decide. That's for you all. Tell me what you think. Man, you want to talk about an absolute shit show. Sorry for the hard open. Welcome to Shoot the Gap, the IDP podcast for Fantasy and Frames. Of course, I'm Nate Markham. With me, as always, is Jorge Edwards. Shit show does not describe Jorge. You probably haven't heard this story. Maybe you have. The weekend Fantasy Football Expo was just last weekend. It sucked, Jorge. You didn't miss a thing. It was boring. There was nobody there. I didn't make any friends. We didn't have a single drop. It was bad. But here is the day leading to the morning of King's Classic, that is. Course, hungover, up, moving, going, walking down, coffee in hand, got the shakes, phone in my pocket, walking outside. I see Lauren Carpenter, who her and I spent the whole weekend hanging out. So we each looked at each other and just gave the nod of, wow, what are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing? I'm going to my car. I said, hey, would you like a ride? Her and Howard and Jeff and another are heading to the event as well. They have a ride. So I am progressing to my vehicle. Pulls up our friend Gary Van Dyke. Gary pulls up, rolls his window down and says, you need a ride? I thought it over. I said, you know what? Why not? Let's go, man. We'll ride together. I got the shakes. I shouldn't be driving anyway. Neither here nor there. So I get in. We start rolling. We get about 2 blocks up. I notice he misses the turn. And he goes, where are we going? I said, what? He goes, where are we heading to? I said, we're going to the Hall of Fame. Are you not going to watch the draft? She's like, nope, I was just going for a drive. So I have now an Uber, if you will, that doesn't know the way to the Hall of Fame. We finally get there, pulls up. Jorge, you'll know from last year, we drafted in the press box of the stadium. That is not where we drafted at this year. So now he leaves. I'm comfortable it's there. It is not there. It is right at about 9:20, which is when we're supposed to be there, 9:30, no later to get started. I now am panicked. You know this. I talked to you. I called you.
Yeah.
I did. I said, where the hell am I going? You said, do you not read your emails? You're going here, you dummy. So now I am walking around the entire Hall of Fame. Hungover, shakes, phone's blowing up. I'm trying to find where I'm going. Build up a little sweat. You know, you're supposed to build up a little sweat before you get into an event. It's not quite the same thing. So I pull in, get right into the Hall of Fame, walk in, see all the faces of everybody in the draft. Wonderful group. And there's 14 chairs at the table. They are all occupied. So I don't have a chair. I don't have a spot to fill in. My computer won't log in. It won't upload. Now I'm sitting by myself in the corner, no computer, gonna draft on my phone. Still got a little bit of the shakes, hungover. It is going to be terrible, but lo and behold, we find a way. My friend Iggy and the group all make room for me. I'm down at that corner. Iggy, if you're on here at some point or you're listening, we were the chatter corner. We know it. We were the fun corner with Rich Miletto. And computer pops up. Everything starts to calm down. I see Gary Davenport had brought for us beef jerky, chips, got some water, some prime drink from Iggy and JC. They hooked us up. It started to look okay. The fog was starting to clear. And then we pulled the cards, and I had the 11th spot is where I picked. And that's where somehow, maybe it got better, or it continued down that downward spiral. It was a hell of a day, my friend. A hell of a day.
Well, and that's just not even like during the draft. Like normally the draft is like the most exhausting part of the Kings Classic. And now I'm exhausted just hearing about your exploits leading up to that point. Which, by the way, I just want to give a little shout out here to everybody who reached out because I couldn't make it. And Nate, I want to give a shout out to your your beautiful bride, Carrie, who on Friday night of the welcome party literally took your phone and FaceTimed me and took me around the entire bar. And so many people were very gracious and wishing me a speedy recovery. That meant the world to me to be a part of Expo weekend. So shout out to Carrie Markham. Thank you very much for that.
You think I remember that? I'm kidding. I remember that. That was actually, it was wonderful. It was great. And people really were talking about the whole weekend, that they were happy to see, you found your way to the Expo, and Friday night was crazy, but Saturday morning was crazy too. We learned a lesson. It was supposed to be, do not get anything to drink on Friday night. Take it easy. I got to meet Mr. Scampers in person.
You met Mr. Scampers?
I did.
Oh, damn it.
Yep. I won't reveal anything, but even better person in real life than in the chats. It was Bob Harris told me, thought it was incognito, but I picked Bob up from the hotel and drove him there, and he was saying how that they're both there, and then it was a mission trying to find out, and it was great. But so man, obviously we see some people activity in the chat. If you have questions or comments or anything, jump over to the YouTube page. Obviously, subscribe. I think we're getting close to 700. If I'm not too far off, hopefully it'll be there. Colby, what's up? Yeah, no beverages Friday night. I spent a lot of time with Colby, which was great. Everybody here. It was delightful meeting you too as well, Mr. Scampers. And our karaoke got cut short, Jorge. They cut karaoke down that Sunday night. It was supposed to go till 11. Yeah, the manager was all butthurt and pissed off that it was too loud or whatever it was, and yet there was
karaoke night. What do they expect?
Yeah, what he's going to expect is not to have that many people there. On Sunday night.
There was that dude from NBC, Crofton, I believe it is, who did Cult of Personality. It was like literally dancing on the tables at the bar, singing the song. Mm-hmm. Which if you haven't seen, go on Twitter, find it, watch it, love it. It's a great video. But speaking of getting into the Kings Classic, this was a big year for us, IDP junkies, just because this is the first time we've had, or I should say, there has been a Kings Classic draft, which has incorporated offense and IDP. Shout out to Nate Cheatham for putting that thought into Bob Lung's ear a couple of years ago. Shout out to Gary Davenport, the godfather of IDP, for helping also to push that. And here we are, gathering a lot of the big IDP minds in the community to participate in this draft. And, we're going to get into this in a little bit, recapping the draft here, putting up the draft board. But Nate, could you maybe give us a little idea of what is it about this draft that maybe is different from, other drafts? I know MFL is the platform that you all used. Mm-hmm. And we all know, or at least a lot of us know, that MFL allows for different customizations. Could you maybe take us through some of the positional, rosters? Was it DLs, LBs, DBs? Did they split it into D tackles, DMs? Just to the tournament a little bit?
Dude, you want to talk about crazy? No, nobody can draft a league. That's what made it so unique, is that it's never, at least in my experience, for many of us, it's the first time that we've had quite this grouping of both scoring and league settings, and it just a little different than the norm. So there was 34 rounds, mind you, of both offense and IDP, 14 teams, 34 rounds, 496 is what we totaled, and players going to be announced. Many people don't know 496 names. I can tell you, I probably was one of them. I'm learning names as we go along. We set them all. I think there's a lot of third string corners that are taken for teams right now. But the settings are from the offensive side, it's a 4-point passing touchdown league. It's a full point PPR. It is not tight end premium, and the remainder is all pretty standard. One for every 10 yards. Rushing, receiving, 1 for every 25 passing, -1 for an interception, 2 for the 2-point conversions, etc. The defense is where Gary made it very close in terms of he wanted to make sure or make people question, should you take the first IDP in the first round? Is it correlative? And those top scoring defensive players put up as much as some of the elite, even quarterbacks in this league. So the idea was yes. And the way it's broken down is this. And the defensive scoring is like even fractional points too. So forced fumbles, 3.15. Interceptions are 6.3. Passes defensed are a full point. The real things are going to get to like the tackle and the sack upside. And your tackles being 1.8 versus 0.9 for the solo. So that 2-to-1 ratio. A sack is 6.3 baseline. Quarterback hit is 1.8. Tackle for a loss is 1.8. And then you get the premiums. And this is where the premium comes in. Defensive tackle, you get an additional 0.5 per every tackle, 0.25 for every assisted, 1.5 for every sack, 0.75 for the hits, 0.1 for every sack yardage, and 0.5 point for the loss. Without going into extensive detail as far as what each scoring is for defensive ends, linebackers, the corners also get a little bump in passes defensed and interceptions. So the idea is to group or narrow those two positions, which most people in most IDP leagues, they don't draft corner. They don't draft defensive tackle because there's not enough point scoring. So in this format, you must start 1 defensive tackle, you must start 2 linebackers, and you must start 1 corner. Everything else, kind of up in the air. You can do whatever. They're mostly the rest are flex spots is the easiest way to look at it. So you can fill up, you're going to have to start some defensive ends. You're going to have to start at least 2 plus. We know that. We know that you're going to have to start some linebackers at the 2, but then the rest is kind of, on the individual. So going in, Jorge, that's where, you got to start looking. And what do we say to every person every year, right? Know your rules, right?
Right.
Nobody knows the rules. No one knows. Well, we all do because we read them, but you don't know what that's going to mean to market value for these players.
Sure.
And so that's where it's going to get crazy is, you have 11 IDP starters, where 4 of them are going to come from 1 DT, 2 linebacker, 1 corner. The rest is a hodgepodge of defense, quarterback, or the offensive side is 1 quarterback, 2 running back, 3 receivers, a tight end, and then the rest are flex spots as well. So that's the format. It was Joey Wright, Craig at Roto Heat, Rich Miletto at Fantasy Guru, Dwight Peebles with Dynasty Nerds, Shane Hallam, Joe Wiggins, Bob Miller, Leo McNeely, myself, Mike Wohlert, Iggy, John Norton, Ricky Rodriguez, and Gary Davenport were the 14 members involved. It was it's kind of a who's who of IDP, and then you throw me into the mix.
Mr. Humble over here. Okay. But no, that sounds like so, for me being somebody who's been playing fantasy football for years, and Nate, you've heard me tell this story, and I'm sure people who are watching, maybe you've heard this story before. I never knew what it was like to play in a fantasy football league with a defense special teams until 2016. Because when I first jumped into fantasy football, it was always offense and IDP. Mm-hmm. So that versus being the other way around for most people, right? So to see this come to fruition and to hear about the people that you're competing against, and the enormity of the fact that this is a part of the Kings Classic, which is the best of the best, is very humbling first of all for Fantasy and Frames to be invited and to be a part of it, and just the fun. Iggy, you have it here in the chat right now. Big day for IDP enthusiasts, 100%. I'm excited to get into it. Are you ready to start going over your draft?
I am. Well, what was awesome about that too is as we were sharing a hallway with, we shared a room first of all with the first ever Queens Classic.
Nice.
So in our room we had the Queens Classic drafting behind us, and we did the IDP. So it was really, it was such an awesome experience to see 2 brand new Kings Classic. And then when we went out into the hallway where the other 2, the Jim Brown draft and the Blanda draft were going on, a lot of people knew. They're like, IDP 34 rounds, you guys are in for something. But there was a lot of positivity. A lot of people came up. Jeff Ratcliffe came over and started talking IDP, and he was even like, well, you could tell, you guys doing 470 plus people, good luck. So yes, that's how it was. But let's jump right into it, man. Like I said, we drew cards, and that gave us our draft order. And I'll tell you this, I had the choice of 7, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. Those were the options I had. So I chose 11. It's kind of my lucky number, if you will. We'll see how lucky it was. The plan was to get, honestly, my plan was to take Nick Chubb. That didn't last too long.
Right.
I mean, he went 5th, and remind you, it's not a super flex league. So you're the standard kind of run the mill Jorge in the first round there. What stands out, of course, is I took Cooper Kupp at 11. Thought of Tony Pollard there, who went 12 to Wohlert. Gary and I had a conversation. Jorge, if I had to ask you, what round would you think the first IDP nomination was going to go off the board? What round would you have maybe guessed?
Honestly, looking over the scoring settings, if the second, but it would have to be like the elite of the elite, high volume. I would probably shoot for a linebacker at that point. And we're talking guaranteed snap percentage, high snap volume, great history of a solo to assist ratio. Just, really, really hammer home there. Would be, second round. I could see that in this type of league.
Yeah. And that's kind of what we weren't intrigued to see if it was going to happen. And it didn't last long. 13th pick. Dwight Peebles decided to grab Nick Bosa. He followed it up on the turn on the way around with Max Crosby. So now he has his 2 bookend defensive ends. Foye Oluokun went to Bob Miller at 14. And so there I am at 11, second round coming up. I knew I didn't want to get caught on the back end of a linebacker run, which for me stops at about Bobby Wagner for that first tier. And yes, and I see that, Iggy and the sports affiliation do love Chubb. He took him right in front. I mean, sitting right next to me. We're sharing Prime energy drinks and water and just having the best of time. And he just sticks it into my heart and takes my Nick Chubb. But you know what? Cooper Kupp is a good consolation at 11. More than happy with that. I knew running backs were going to be a premium, but that second round, I also knew linebackers were going to be a premium. And the one thing that I realized is that after Bobby Wagner, those top 5 for me, there's that tier break, and I wanted to be part of it. So I I kept the run going with Nick Bolton. Homer's picks aside, that is part of it. Of course, I had the choice between Bolton and Roquan. I have Roquan ahead of Bolton, but if you can't have fun playing fantasy, what are you going to do, right?
Sure.
So
I have a question for you before we keep going. I'm assuming that this draft followed the trend of true position. That's becoming the norm now with MFL, thanks to Gary. Would that be accurate? Where you have your traditional 3-4 outside linebackers being classified as defensive ends, and then you have your inside linebackers just being classified as linebackers. Is that accurate in terms of how this draft went?
That's exactly right. And that actually goes into part of the reasoning for me to take Nick Bolton there at linebacker, because part of the IDP panel, which I was blessed to share that stage with Iggy as well, and Bob and Gary and Mike and Leo and Matt. I'm sorry if I miss anybody at the top of my head, but regardless, it was the question asked to me is, with true position designation, what does that do? And it lengthens that defensive line grouping, but it does kind of narrow that linebacker, that elite linebacker tools, because you can, granted, you can put some of those edge rushers at linebacker you could have before, but you didn't really want to. You didn't want to have Zadarius Smith in your LB spot. But starting Bolton there. And what did we see? We saw Nick Bolton, Roquan, Bobby Okereke, CJ Mosley, and then Bobby Wagner, Logan Wilson, and Zaire Franklin all off the board before it came back around me into the third round, which means I would have taken, well, the next linebacker taken, if you had to guess who Mike Woolert was going to take at linebacker, it wouldn't have taken you too long to figure out who his next pick would have been. And that's who I probably wouldn't have taken him, but seeing the list of names available, it got ugly pretty fast. That answer is Divine Diablo, because we all know that Mike loves Divine Diablo, and he made sure to get him. And it was on brand, if you will. Nice. If looking at that board, Jorge, anybody stand out, or you have any questions about anybody's early start? I mean, nothing shocking at this point, correct?
Let me look on my phone here. Sorry, because the screen is Shane Hallam. I think the one that for me, I guess that stands out a little bit in the fourth round was Fred Warner. And you and I, we've had conversations and we've talked about this in our early linebacker rankings episodes, a couple episodes back on the Fantasy and Frames podcast, which if you haven't listened to, go download, subscribe, like, all that jazz. Listen to the episode. Let us know what you think. We talked about Fred Warner, super consistent, but not like splashy. Just does what he does. He's kind of and knowing me that I'm saying this, it's going to come across as a slight. I don't mean it that way, but he's like Tremaine Edmonds plus to a certain degree. I know that's harsh. But I found that interesting there in terms of that draft pick, when somebody like a Devin White, Alex Singleton, Josie Jewell, are on the board there. I'm kind of curious, as if you don't mind me going back to your draft a little bit.
Yeah,
you went Kupp, you went Bolton, and then you went Devontae Adams. Why did you decide to deviate? You mentioned the scarcity of linebacker because of true position. What made you want to go Brian Burns in the fourth round versus Josie Jewell, Singleton, Devin White, so on and so forth?
Yeah, at that point. So the one thing about the scoring too is that linebackers don't see a real bump. They're far from negated, but there's quite a bit of a drop in terms of the overall. There's no sack upside, which is odd for a linebacker. So that kind of like does hurt some of the blitzing linebackers. There's only bonus addition for tackles for loss, which is huge for some, and then tackles and assists. So it actually brings down some of those linebackers that I have raised up that normally, because they do fill the sheet, like with Dre Greenlaws, and maybe even back in the if you want to move up Bentley because he has so many pass rushes, and Jerome Baker, etc. Devin White, which I love Devin White, but that's not what I'm saying. So at defensive end, there was that next tier break. And for me, that's exactly where Brian Burns fits. Is he was the top or the last in that first elite pick or elite defensive end. And I was really happy to do it. And yes, I did not ask Carrie. She did just watch Hard Knocks with me. And nice. She saw, and I pointed out Brian Burns. I said, I really love Brian Burns. I doubt she was paying attention and had any clue that it was me alluding to this podcast and this conversation. I set up everything so that she feels engaged and everything. And Carrie, if this is the first year listening, Jorge wanted to say thank you for taking him around the bar. It was not only you, but she also had the daughter, Haley, on FaceTime as well, interacting with everybody. So she's quite the engagement farmer there. But yeah, so Brian Burns, the way I look at it, was that kind of last one. And we see that is you either take Burns or you're going to go to we saw the defensive tackles start to come off the board a little bit. Quinnen Williams was the next one up, and Jonathan Allen. And then you see that if you go down the board and you see after Brian Burns, the next real edge was Iggy's man, Alex Highsmith. I heard a ton of talk about Highsmith out of Iggy. So if anybody that doesn't follow along with Iggy or the sports affiliation, just know that I'm sorry, Craig's puns are second to none. They are, yes, that is carrying Jorge across the bar. It was triumphant. You could have heard the horns in the background as Jorge. You couldn't have heard shit because it was pouring down rain and there was 100 people in a bar for, designed for 50. But yeah, so Highsmith goes there. So Brian Burns. So now I've got what, Jorge? I've got 2 receivers. And you tell me, do you think third round Davante Adams as the wide receiver, I think 13 or 14, is there? I mean, I know your opinion on Davante Adams, but tell me, is knowing that I'm drafting for you.
Right. You're drafting. I love the Davante Adams pick. I think for me, I don't know whether this, my memory's kind of fading on me a little bit. Was this before or after he hurt his calf in practice?
It was actually same day.
Same day. Okay.
Same day. And remind you that morning was chaotic for me. There was no morning for me. It was probably as I was walking around the Expo trying to find it, had it instead of being settled in like the other 13 smart people of this draft, I could have had the computer up and seen calf injury, which I don't believe is actually a calf injury. I think that's Davante Adams being a little, whiner and wanting to be squeaky wheel. It's neither, between me and myself, but
sure, of course. Yeah, no, I got you. I'm scanning the board here. Obviously you go, dun, 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 dun. You come back around with Lamar Jackson, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is this super flex or is this just one quarterback?
One quarterback. He was the QB 5 taken, and it's right where I have him in this particular league, though, with 4-point passing touchdowns. That for me builds up Lamar higher than that next tier, especially when of the pocket passers, just because there's better variance at least a higher ceiling for Lamar in my opinion, at least.
All right. I found the Frankie Luvu pick after you really interesting, just because we've heard about the potential switch to him being more defensive endish, but in Carolina with the change in scheme there, I kind of want to get to Leo over, the number 1 ranker at Fantasy Pros last year, going Shaq Leonard that round. All the reports have been like he's full go. He's this and that. If he's Leo, if you're in the chat, I'd love to hear, if you could type in just a little summary on your thoughts on Shaq Leonard. I thought that was really cool. Devin White, Shaq Leonard, back-to-back picks.
Loved it.
If Shaq Leonard was right there and you had already secured your quarterback, well, instead of asking that question, let me ask you, Nate, what are your thoughts on Shaq Leonard?
I mean, I think we all know, and whenever he was announced, you could hear everybody in there go, great pick. The LB16 with the LB1 upside. Even for, the injury, the hard thing about Shaq is that I don't think you're not drafting for a middle ground. And that's what I don't believe Iggy would have been doing. Or not Iggy, but Leo would have been doing as well, as thinking, all right, if I can get, 11 games out of Leonard at that point for the LB16, it's not a wasted pick by any means, but it's not his direction. It's go for it at that point. And if you pair him with Devin White, who I think Devin White's going to have a rebound season from last year, which shouldn't be called a rebound season. It should be back into that top 5-6 defensive scoring, especially for an offense that's going to be pretty poor. So he'll be on the field a ton. Those 2 linebackers, I think, are as good as anybody's 2 linebackers that I watch draft. I mean, obviously, if you want to talk about Gary Davenport's draft, Roquan and Bobby Wagner, yes, that's, but he would have to make it up on the offensive side. Leo had, he already had Saquon, CD, and Chris Olave, so there was a little bit of room. So yeah, and I really like that spot right there. So at that point, you can start to see all the linebackers going, and knowing it's going to be got to pick and strike when the right opportunity presents itself. And so, that's the name of this game, man. You're not playing for third place or second. You're really playing for first.
Leo channeling right now is inner Ricky Bobby. If you're not first, you're last. That makes sense, Leo. Love it.
It's true.
Coming back around here, Levante David, I thought that was a really cool pick. Just because you saw how he finished last year. You mentioned about the potential rebound with Devin White this year, but we saw down the stretch last year, it was really Levante David who was helping out more in run support, getting a lot of those tackles, having that great solo to assist ratio. So that pick kind of just jumped out to me in the 6th round. You jump out, you go into Aiden Hutchinson. Highsmith comes out with Iggy Shocker. We talked about it a little bit. But I want we get Devondre Campbell. We get some offensive players in Christian Watson and Dameon Pierce, Joe Burrow. And then we get to our guy, Christian Wilkins, who we've talked about a lot. But you know what? We like him so much. Let's keep talking about him, Nate.
Yeah.
Given the premium nature of the defensive tackle position, what is it that really made you think, this is the guy I want right here?
Well, position, not scarcity, but benefit. That defensive tackle, there's really, I have a top tier of 3 to 4 guys. And Christian Wilkins is in that grouping with Quinnen Williams. Chris Jones is in that conversation as well. And obviously, you can always throw Aaron Donald into the mix just because. But that defensive tackle bonus of a full extra half a point for every tackle and a quarter of a point for every assist, and then 1.5 for the sack. We were doing some of the math, and the way it worked out is that for every sack by a defensive tackle is over 12 points, which is crazy. And Chris Wilkins is not the sack specialist. We know that. 3.5 sacks last year. But the 98 tackles from a defensive tackle. And that's not like some super outlier season for him, because he's had at least 80 tackles over the last 2 seasons. He's put up those same numbers. If he could get those sack totals up to like 6 or 7, you have a first round talent according to scoring wise, as my defensive in like number 2.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. We had Mike go with Drake Greenlaw next. Wrapping around Matt Milano. Bob Miller going with Matt Milano. Do you think just the vacancy in Tremaine Edmonds not being there and the uncertainty with whether it's Dotson, whether it's somebody else at middle, kind of swayed him in terms of Matt Milano? Or do you think I'm missing something on Matt Milano's, upside this year?
No, I don't think you miss. I think Matt Milano does a lot of everything. I think that's what makes him intriguing in this type of format is, linebackers were getting scooped off the board. So at this point, to attack somebody that has 90, 100 tackle, I say floor because he did that in basically 15 games last year, but then double-digit pass defenses, multiple interceptions. He can still get to the quarterback. Those aren't premium or inflated numbers in this scoring, but they all add in, especially to a linebacker position when we get points, good points across the board. So I'm fine with Matt Milano as far as that linebacker goes. Hey, Hollywood.
Hello. What's going on, brother?
What's up? Hey, talking a little football. Sorry I run over on the other pod I had to do tonight.
No, man, we're glad you're here. And we're getting to a point in the draft here where we're talking in the 7th round, and we're going to get to one of your guys here in a second because, Nate, you went offense with Rachaad White. We got Justin Simmons just off the board, safety over in Denver. And then we got Craig Ruth here, who's always Mr. Pun-tastic and is in the chat right now. He went and got your guy, Azeez Al-Shaair, in the 7th round of this Kings Classic Dick Butkus inaugural league here. Azeez Al-Shaair, you, by the way, have put out for us at Fantasy and Frames a IDP target profile, which you can find then the article for the profile on fantasyandframes.com pretty soon, if not tomorrow. We got Azeez Al-Shaair here. Hollywood, What are your thoughts on Aziz Shahir, in terms of what you've heard from him in terms of reports from training camp and just your overall thoughts on him as a player as well as his opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, everything's been kind of positive, right? They're kind of trying to be careful and not overloading this preseason, right? Because they're super thin at the position, right? The next guys, Monty Rice and Jack Gibbons, and so they don't have anything behind him. Which, as a fantasy manager, that's what you want to hear, right? Volume, 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 and he's going to get it, and especially in that division, right? So I think it's a win-win for him, the Titans. I think it is for fantasy managers as well. I just think the volume is going to be there, and with nobody to really push or press him for reps, it puts a lot on his shoulders being the main guy. But I think we've seen he can be that guy, and now he's going to get a chance to prove it. So I like it in the 7th round. It's not. I don't think that's a reach, but I don't think that that's too bad of a spot for him either, right? I mean, considering some of the players that's going around him, because look, we had Campbell and Milano go right behind him a few picks later. So
I'd rather have Al-Shaair at LB24, like Craig said. And when he went, I will say there was a lot of murmurs. A lot of people were congratulating Craig, but Craig has the best poker face of all poker faces when it comes to making picks. And we could tell. I could tell if he was excited, if he was auto-picked, or if he's his LB1. It's a very intriguing approach that Craig has. Never let your opponents know if you did something good and or bad. There were some groans. I got a lot of groans. Bob Miller, if Bob was in here, he would probably tell you, again, you never know if that's always a positive or not. I will tell you later on when we start getting towards the end. And the one groan, anger, actually, from Gary Davenport made my draft. We'll talk about that in a little bit. I want to get you guys' opinion on, so we know linebacker was getting thin, as we just recently discussed. Al-Shaair at 24, Jack Campbell 25, Matt Milano 26. I'm looking at that next tiering of linebackers, and I see the grouping of, similar to how they went, Tremaine Edmonds, Troy Anderson, and like Quay Walker. And then you can throw, Pete Warner's in the world, Kazir Whites, and some of them, depending upon different ranking systems, Patrick Queens, Cody Bartons. I took Quay Walker as LB27, which is quite a bit higher in terms of value-wise than where I have him, because I have him firmly as an LB2 in that 20 range. Is that a solid LB2? Would you guys agree to stack up with Nick Bolton? Hollywood, start with you.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like you said, Milano and Campbell went just a few picks ahead of him, and they went right behind Shaair, right? So with some of the depth at the position getting gone, I like it. I know they've got Devontae Campbell up there, but I think we talked about it in our linebacker redraft episode. I like Walker a lot better than Campbell. I just think you're really going to see him take off this year. So yeah, you've got Nick Bolton, who's arguably 1 or 2, maybe 3, if you're crazy, but to have Walker behind him as your 2, I love it. I think it's good value, especially in the 8th round. That's really good value.
It's what I bring Hollywood on. I'll send you the $5 for complimenting that and agreeing with it in the mail. It's probably going to be in the form of Budweiser dollars.
I'll take it. As long as the check, I'll take it.
Exactly. Damn. You're privy to my game. Speaking of things bouncing, I bounced around from position to position pretty good, Jorge. As you'll notice, I got kind of the color. No back-to-back positions for me in any rounds, I don't believe, until maybe like you get into rounds 20 and 21.
You diversified well.
I tried to. Deontay Johnson is my wide receiver 3. So at this point now, I have my quarterback in Lamar Jackson. My RB1 is Rachaad White. Of course, then the next day he goes down, and and that it had me a little concerned, but he's okay. I love Rashad White in this format. I don't know if I love him as my RB1, but you're going to find shallow areas. You're not going to be deep in a ton of positions because it's 14 teams and they're really sharp drafters. So I know I'm going to have a weakness. It was probably going to be at running back, but I made up for it wide receiver, I think. Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams, and then my wide receiver 3 is Deontay Johnson, who I think we all probably have heard me talk about Deontay ad nauseum. But the next pick is what I got to get to, guys. I got to know, am I too crazy for just going ahead and saying I'm going to lay it all out there? I'm going to follow my actual rankings. Kyle Hamilton as my DB3 off the board, as the DB3 off the board. Is there too much man love for Kyle Hamilton, Jorge?
I don't know. I guess people have to go over to fantasyandframes.com and read your 2023 IDP target profile on Kyle Hamilton. But for me, no, I'm a huge fan of what he can do. Obviously, coming out of Notre Dame, I believe it was last year, towards this down the stretch last season, you saw his versatility and what he can do. Now getting that starting spot this year, I like it. I like it a lot. But the people who are curious about your opinion, head over to fantasyandframes.com and read his article today, right now.
Perfect. In response to Craig's post there, the one thing that I noticed is that I got to the next pick and it was Isaiah Pacheco, and I got, everybody was saying, homer pick. Am I going to be happy with Pacheco, or am I going to listen? Should I not, listen to the haters, and maybe I should?
The players gonna play, and the haters gonna hate, baby. I'm just gonna shake it off.
That hasn't been played all in a long time.
It's been a while. We got to bring
back to you. That's for you, Hollywood. That that was much needed. But yeah, I don't care that it is more of a homer pick. But as the RB2, Isaiah Pacheco, we saw him in practice today. I saw him in practice today. I don't know if you guys did or not. Probably don't watch too much Chiefs training camp highlights, but he looks good. He looks healthy. He is probably the RB, and he's the RB1 for sure there. But
well, let me ask you a question. Is he on pace to start week 1? Because that was the concern, right, a couple months ago. Is that what the case is right now with him?
Everything that I see in here says that he is on pace. The hand injury and other things that were going into it, it's leading to that. And yes, I know McKinnon later is better. Sure, for the price, I can understand that. I mean, the difference of 4 picks, 4 running backs, at least separating the two, they're pretty close. I just want to.
Are you getting Pacheco later is the concern, right?
No, I'm not. Exactly.
Which is why you probably grabbed him right when you did, right?
Yeah, there was nothing. I mean, nothing around where in the 11th, if you look after him, I would rather have Pacheco over DeAndre Swift. I didn't really care to have Will Anderson, Justin Houston, Juju, Deron Payne, Dexter Lawrence, those guys, and then maybe later. Sure, Samaje Perine would have been nice to have, but I think that there's a better case that Pacheco takes the full workload, and McKinnon doesn't have quite the, McKinnon towards the end of the season. I mean, that's kind of an inflated reason for optimism a little bit. And this coming from a Chiefs fan. Those weeks that he had were, I don't want to say outliers, but they're probably more of an outlier than the chance that Pacheco is a 180 carry back that can still put up RB2, floor.
I got a question for, it's a couple picks down from where you're at right now, but being relegated to my chair while I'm nursing my leg injury, I had the fortune of watching a bunch of ESPN lately, and in the mornings, or maybe it was NFL Network, one of the two, and they had like he's almost like a regular almost, and I'm talking about Damone Clark coming on and talking shop, talking Cowboys training camp, and I see you took him here in the 15th round, right after you took Sky Moore. Can you speak to Damone Clark? I know let me just. Can you speak to Damone Clark a little bit?
I love Damone Clark. Last year at this, we had this conversation about this time, and coming off the neck injury, there was reason for concern. I think all of us had our concerns, but I think all of us also saw the upside. And I needed another linebacker because we're going to start 2 linebackers every week. I know I have my 2 starters. At this point, I could use a third, and I'm looking around. And if you start looking at the next names on that list, for instance, the LB 51 taken is Jermaine Pratt. The upside for Damone Clark for me over Jermaine Pratt and Nicholas Morrow, Tyrell Dodson, some of those other names that you're starting to see right after, he was the clear leader in that group. And then, of course, we get back to the bar or to our hotel. Sorry, it's a hotel first, bar second, but it's a bar. It's a bar first, hotel second. And friend of ours, Marcus Mosier, who is, covers for the Dallas Cowboys for Locked On. I asked him, I showed him the draft. We were talking about it, and he went straight to Damone Clark and just raved about the pick and how he thinks that Damone Clark is going to be, huge asset to that linebacking core. And then we see him come out in the preseason game, and he looks phenomenal and getting to the ball, effective in tackling. There's a lot of positives about Damone Clark right now out of Dallas. And as my 3, I'm comfortable with that. You guys have differing opinions, or are you just are you shocked to see him at that spot? I don't really know where to put him because I have him ranked higher than that. I have him as my LB 39.
Ollie, what do you think?
I guess considering, looking at the board, like you were saying, what is coming off after him, right? I guess that makes him a good pick here. So I'm not too crazy about him because I have some questions about Overshown, the rookie that they drafted. There's a lot of hype around him. So I wasn't a big Damone Clark fan last year. I just, I kind of feel like he's just a guy, right? But he's just a guy is getting a huge volume, so that kind of bumps him up. I'm just kind of skittish of what Overshown can do. I wonder if this is just pure rookie hype or if he's going to actually eat into some of his volume at some point. I guess we'll see here pretty soon, but I get, like I said, again, considering who was taken after him at the position, I think it's an okay pick there. And one more thing, when you said mentioning bouncing around, I did not know where you were going with that, and I immediately went back to if y'all remember the Man Show with Adam Coppola with girls jumping on trampolines. That's kind of where my head went with that. So
makes sense.
Is that the Ziggy Zugga oi 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 where they did
I
remember that.
yes.
Wow, you are
Dr.
pulling
Drew
out
and
some
Adam Coppola.
early 2000s Adam
Yes.
Carolla, all that jazz.
Yes.
Yes.
And yeah, so you went Nico Collins after that. And then I want to get to Kevin Byard next here because in the defensive back show you guys did last week with Gary Davenport, who came on, he had Kevin Byard in his rankings. Hollywood, I believe you had Kevin Byard in your top 12 rankings.
Yes.
Nate, what was your thought process with taking Kevin Byard here?
Screw over Gary Davenport. 100%. 100% was this will make him so mad because when I'm looking at picks, it was round, let's see. I want to say it was right out. I think it was Nico. No, I think it was Damone Clark and then Nico back to back. I'm watching. There was a run where like it got to the point that it was Oh shoot, did I do that on purpose for everybody else?
You good?
So there's a run here where there's like a number of safeties in a row. If you look at round 20, boom, 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 boom. There's like 5 out of 6 right there. Before that, there was a couple different runs at the end. You'll notice that Kyle Duggar in rounds 15, 16, that turn. And so it started getting a little close. And I thought, all right, Gary's going to need one because he doesn't have a defensive back yet. And I know Gary's approach. And this is something for everybody listening. Never do this. Do not just take an extra spot to spite somebody. But I was also playing the waiting game because I knew I wanted my second defensive back to complement Kyle Hamilton. And Kevin Byard was 100% at the top of my list. And it got around, and then, round 17, after Gary went in 16 and he went Mostert and then OBJ, Kevin Byard came off the board, and expletives were a flying. Not so much until later that evening when we all were riding back from the event together in the car, and he was telling me, or not later, after the draft, because he gave me a ride back to the hotel. And chapped his ass, I think, was one of the phrases he used. A few other things. And in true fashion, of course, I'm sorry, Gary. I didn't even think that you needed a safety at that point. I didn't really need him. I guess I should have been conscious. No, it was intent. Gary, when you're listening to this, if you listen to this, you already know this. I've kind of told you already once we had some more drinks in us. But yes, this was the Gary Davenport pick when he finishes as a top 8 defensive back to go along with Kyle Hamilton and Taron Johnson. There you go. So yeah, Kevin Byard, love that pick. Don't know if I love the round 18 pick as much as I do. I love it so much. It was unnecessary, but I wanted to do it. Anthony Richardson.
You're a big fan of his.
Love Anthony Richardson. A huge fan. I don't know when I'm ever going to start him because I have Lamar Jackson. And you look at the people around it and you think, okay, could I have taken Kwity Paye? Sure. Another defensive end. Could I have taken maybe Tyler Higbee since I didn't have a tight end at that point? Yes, that probably would have been smarter. There was a few others, but not much. You know what I mean? Let's
get into that for a second. Cornerback. I think this is your first cornerback. What is it about Taron Johnson? Is it just I just needed a cornerback, or is there something that stood out from him last year or in seasons past that you admire from a fantasy standpoint for IDP?
So, especially in this format, with since we have to start. So, Hollywood, you weren't here for the very beginning where the position designations. The must starts on defense are you must start 1 defensive tackle, 2 linebackers, and 1 corner. Everything else is flex worthy, basically. You don't have to start a safety at all if you don't want to. You can start, all corners. And the corner is getting such a bump in all categories, and not just pass deflections and interceptions, but they also get an extra 0.6 for tackles and 0.3 for assisted tackles and 0.6 for tackles for a loss. And if you look at Taron Johnson, I want a premier and a premium slot defender for a team that's going to have decent, enough volume against. And I think that's where Buffalo, they don't have a linebacker that really scares me. So there's opportunity for more, middle of the field stuff to take place. Hindsight, I went back and forth. I really wanted Nate Hobbs. I really wanted Taron Johnson. And I thought I drafted Nate Hobbs when the draft was even over. Even up until like that night, I was certain I had Nate Hobbs until I saw Taron Johnson. And I thought, what in the hell was I thinking? Why did I go one way or the other? But I was fine with both. They were right there, 1 and 2 in my model. It just that slot coverage really pays dividends. And we've seen the success of other guys. 2 picks later, Kenny Moore the second, L'Jarius Sneed last year. Hufanga when he moved up as a safety, even though he's not a corner necessarily, but those, that box snaps, and that's where Taron Johnson has lived, and he's done successfully. So I think it makes sense.
We go back, we go Josh Sweat after that, Jalen Thompson, great value there on Chigakonkwo at tight end. You got Witherspoon, the rookie there in Seattle.
Same
Randy,
reason.
go ahead.
Same reason for Witherspoon as with Taron Johnson.
Okay.
The Seattle has talked about moving Devin Witherspoon into that slot role, and he's really excelled at it. Excellent in run stopping. I think that he's worked his way onto that field. Hollywood, would you agree that Witherspoon, from a cornerback perspective, has for Seattle being in that he's taken the Kobe Bryant kind of role from last year, but he's a much better playmaker. You like the pick with Devin Witherspoon?
I do. I think that's why Seattle fell in love with him, and I think that's why all teams kind of were falling in love with him. That's why he was so highly projected to go so high, right? Is his ability to shine in the run game. He's a dog mentality. He just isn't afraid to come down and hit. Really good tackler. I think he's going to excel in that spot. You mentioned Kobe Bryant kind of playing that role last year, and I thought it was kind of interesting that we saw in week one, or preseason week one, that they were kind of playing Kobe Bryant at safety, and he was shining there. So Seattle, they've got a lot of pieces, and they're trying to recreate that whole Legion of Boom thing, right?
Right.
Not saying that they are, but they've got a good start on it, right? And I think some of these pieces, it may take 2 or 3 weeks before we truly see what their plan and vision is. But yeah, I like it. And I like Witherspoon for a corner. Honestly, I would have took Witherspoon where you took Johnson. I mean, and Johnson's a good corner and all, but I just think the upside with Witherspoon is going to be there because they got Rick Woolen and they've got, if he's healthy, they're going to have Jamal Adams, and they've got Julian Love back there. So they've got a lot of pieces. So I think Witherspoon's just going to be able to line up and just play, right? And not have to worry about trying to carry. So yeah, I like the pick, especially in round 26. That's value. That's what you're shooting for this late, right? So
Right.
So to cap off the rest of the draft here, Nate, because I know we're running close on the hour here. Allen Robinson, come on, man. Is that?
Got to shoot for. You know what? If all the talks of him being in the slot in Pittsburgh, is he washed? Most likely. Is there a chance that he's 2 years removed from being a top 36 wide receiver? Sure, but
at that point,
you're supposed to shoot for the moon and not shoot yourself in the foot, right?
Well, yeah, but let's look at. I can tell you that I did. Yes, that's very, very good. There's not a lot of options at round 28 of a 14 team draft.
I do like the Nolan Smith pick there in round 31. Is that Deion Jones at 33?
That is Deion Jones. That was it got really late in the day, and it was getting to the point where it was like, you know what? Here's a person who joins a new team. Is there a likelihood and an opportunity for him to start for Carolina? Sure. If he does, if by the beginning of week 1, if he somehow carves out a role, he would be in this league. He would probably be the number 1 waiver pickup or top waiver pickup for people, because people would look for, if you can get 45 snaps out of any position in this type of league, then that's value, and he would be up there. And will he be that guy? Doubtful. But did he have 100 tackles 2 years ago, or whatever it was? Maybe 2 might be a stretch, but within the last decade, he's done that. And you know what? I'm going to take that. I'm going to shoot for the moon, right? And then what they tell you to do.
Like you said, round 33. I mean, you know what? You got to take the best upside you can get, right? So we recap your draft here for the Dick Butkus League. Walking out of it, obviously you're exhausted. How do you feel about your team and of course try to be as unbiased as possible. But what are your thoughts here?
No, unbiased aside, the way I look at it is I have a top 5 linebacker, or top 5 quarterback. I've got really good depth at wide receiver with Cup, Adams, Deontay, Sky Moore, Nico Collins. I'm happy with that. Even with Rashid Shaheed and Van Jefferson, everybody will have a path to significant snaps and upside. And the flex spot, because that's the one thing with these leagues that everybody says, Kings Classic, this is Jorge from last year. Those 3 flex spots on offense that you have to fill every week get thin fast, and it's ugly. But that's just the nature of the beast. That's the hard part. And so, like, if I'm submitting my lineup each week, and my lineup consists of Lamar Jackson, my running backs being Pacheco and Rashad White, the running back depth sucks. I hate my running backs. There's a chance that, I have Kendry Miller and Evan Hull, and if Jonathan Taylor did step away from the team and something's up there, maybe that could be a lottery ticket. We'll see. But being able to start Devontae, Nico, Jefferson, Deontay, Cup, Sky Moore is fine. The tight end is tight end. I love having Christian Wilkins. I think that I have a legit top 5 defensive tackle and a game changer in our scoring metric. Defensive end's okay with Burns, Josh Allen, who I think is destined for a rebound season. The pressure percentage should equate to sacks, and Josh Sweat. But I'm thin at linebacker. I know that. That's my concern, is having Bolton, Damone Clark, Quay Walker, and the aforementioned Deion Jones leaves a lot to be desired. I would rather have switched out something for one, but hopefully Byard, Hamilton, and Jalen Thompson make up for that. So overall, I would say I give my draft a B. Considering the situation and how the day started and went towards the draft, it's an A+ draft. Considering how the actual is without those things. Or Hollywood, holy shit, that morning was chaos, brother. I'm telling you, it went from walking a mile with the sweats the next day and trying to find the right room and getting there and not having a seat to sit in and no computer access. And it was a rough start. I think it ended well. I would say I would give it a B grade. And I think that I'm in the middle of where I haven't projected every other's team, but I think there's a path to the playoffs with proper management. What would you two think, given what you've seen so far?
Here's the thing. You mentioned a B minus or whatever it was. 14 team, 30 plus round draft. How can it's almost like everybody's walking out with the same grade, right? Because everyone's going to be deficient in some position here and there. The Kings Classic drafts they're brutal. They're brutal for a reason. They really test you. And you brought it up just then and there. The in-season management is what's really going to separate, people from different, to different echelons in the rankings. Here's a question I didn't ask you earlier. Is there trading allowed in this draft or no?
No, the only big change is it's fab this year, whereas I think last year it was still waiver priority.
Gotcha.
Hollywood, go ahead.
Yeah, I like it. I'd give it a solid B. I mean, you've got some really good value. Like we were talking about Byard, I think that's getting him that far down in the draft. That's almost like stealing. And I know you said Jerry was upset, but I have to imagine that he wasn't the only one that was pissed when you pulled him off the board there, because that's easily a top 5 safety for this year, and you're getting him that far down. I like the Weatherspoon pick. I thought you did pretty well. I mean, it's solid. I mean, it's, I wasn't crazy about the Damone Clark, right? I have some questions there, but, you're going to have, I think in any kind of draft like this, I think you're going to have some players like that, right? And I think those are going to be the ones that kind of separate or make or break you a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's a solid roster. So I really like what you did with your defensive back. I think that's going to help you a lot.
Perfect, man. That's good to hear. So,
nice job, dude. Very nice job, and congrats to everybody else who participated in the Dick Butkus League inaugural league here for the Kings Classic. You did the brand well, Nate. Great job, man.
I tried. I know that it wasn't quite the same as having you there, but I tried to channel as much of my inner Jorge as I could. And
Ooh, that's scary. You have an inner Jorge?
Wow. Well, I do. So I made a lot of Star Wars and Star Trek jokes to people, and mostly, and I only spoke in the other guy's references. The
Perfect.
entire my whole vocabulary was that.
Love it.
And I see you have your Kings Classic shirt on.
So, I do. I have the I have the IDP in support of you and what you did.
Nice.
This is and I talked about it earlier, but this is huge, having a Kings Classic IDP draft here. So again, shout out to Gary Davenport and Nate Cheatham, and most importantly Bob Lung for giving the okay for it. And I'm just glad everybody had a good time, and I'm glad you had a good time doing the draft. And it's great being back on the show and just talking shop with you guys, man. It's been too long.
Absolutely. I look forward to jumping back in next week when I think we'll go from this draft to maybe one of the final Shoot the Gap episodes. Speaking of drafts, I think we might have a little special mock draft episode next week where maybe we can get some of these guys that were part of the Kings Classic to jump in and compete against you guys and see how it goes. I'm always up for it. Obviously, hit me up over at Nate Markham or at Fantasy and Frames. You can contact us any way there, or at Jorge B. Edwards. Hollywood, of course, it's always been a pleasure speaking with you. I'm glad you had a chance to look over mine. And the one thing that I would say is, if you haven't gotten into IDP, if you're watching this, you probably play IDP. Let's be honest. No one's listening to an hour of us talk about an IDP draft, unless you're degenerate like Joey, who, by the way, Best Dressed Award. Gary Davenport had a battle. It was equally, Carrie calls him Bruno Mars because he had a 24 karat outfit on, and Joey will tell you milk was a bad idea esque type. I don't know if there's a correlation there, because it got hot Saturday night and he had it on, and I felt really bad for him. And Joey, I did not crap on your defensive lineman. I would say that there were times when you have to everybody's going to have I'd say weakness, but we didn't go through and actually beat up on anybody's teams. This is a positive show where I don't talk. Everybody got a B. Everybody got a B, and everybody's got a participation trophy and going on. I thought, yeah, exactly. Once he hit the open air, he was good. Once I hit the open air after drafting and the sweats and the shakes got left my body, I was good too. But I think there was a lot of, I should share the board. In fact, actually, that's what I'll do. I will share the Kings Classic IDP board onto Twitter. So anybody, if you want to go in and you want to crap on Joey's team, I'll put it up there, and please tag me as you crap on his team, because I want to hear any negatives and go from there. And look at this. I tell you, we start to get towards the end, and the Godfather himself, Gary, rewind about 40 minutes, about 30 minutes, and you will hear the reason why I picked Kevin Byard, and you probably won't like
Salt
me.
in the wound here.
It's going to be a rough one. I'm going to hopefully jump off before you listen to it. But yeah, Gary looked great, by the way, you guys for the panel and the.
I saw him dressed to the nines. Did he have wingtip shoes? I believe it was this year.
Yeah, I think he had 14 rings on somehow on 10 fingers. I'm not quite sure how the math works out, but it was.
Was he the godfather of IDP or the pimp of IDP at that point?
So that's actually funny you say that, because I want to continue to promote this, that Kevin Tompkins and myself had this idea that in addition to the belt, the highest scoring team in each league should get the King's Classic chalice. And it should be a chalice because we're like, man, I wish we had something to drink out of that was cool here. And yeah, and a chalice for the highest scoring points in each league should get it. Because I'm sorry, if I can't win and I get ripped off because I had the most points and you didn't win the overall and you lose the belt, a chalice would be a super baller thing to be drinking on at the DoubleTree afterwards.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure Gary did have can be both the pimp and Godfather.
He had an IDP pinky ring. That's amazing. That is amazing.
The ID pinky ring. That's great.
Huh?
To the P in there. That's the bar set really high. Gary sets the standards for everything.
Yep.
For sure.
So,
but no, that was a really cool recap, dude. I very, very proud of the draft, and just again, you know, words can't describe how awesome it is to have an IDP Kings Classic League. Finally,
I know. I will say before we leave, I am embarrassed to admit there was a good 4 to 5 days worth of time that I thought this was an IDP only league, and 34 rounds and 14 teams. If you knew how many defensive tackles deep on each team I was going, it got ugly really fast. Deion Jones was one of those names that I was thinking. I was like, oh no, we're digging deep. Luckily, I am just stupid, and it, you know, that's okay. But guys, thanks. Like I said, if you haven't followed or subscribed to the YouTube channel, please do so now. Hit the bell. You'll know when we come on to talk trash about my Kevin Byard pick and why it was the best pick of the draft, and why Iggy is continuing to be the boss that he is, because he single-handedly kept me alive prior to the draft with the spot on the table and the prime drink, and I believe even I got some snacks. So thank you all. Yeah, it was wonderful.
Wow.
And for those who didn't attend the expo, I believe Bob Lung is posting videos of the panels soon on the Fantasy Football Expo website. So check out the IDP panel that Gary Davenport emceed that we were able to sponsor this year, fortunately, and check that out as well.
Yeah. So for Jorge and Hollywood, and for the Iggy Nate corner that we had going on with everybody else, we will see you next week.